So we are talking about the movie Pandemic. This is the third film coming out in the last few years to be pretty much all in the first person, where you are literally seeing through the character's eyes. In 2014 we had the German movie FPS, first person shooter. In 2015 we had probably the more high profile kind of film like this, Hardcore. And then we have this one coming out just now, basically in 2016, Pandemic. Now this one is directed by John Suits, stars Rachel Nichols. She was in the TV show Continuum. You also have Alfie Allen, who was in, of course, Game of Thrones, or still is in Game of Thrones. And the conceit here is basically it's set in a kind of an America which has been ravaged by a virus. It's a zombie type virus. And there's a kind of group of survivors that are held up in Los Angeles, basically. And the idea being that I guess the commanding officer sends out teams of people to try and locate other survivors, and he always comes to go with a particular setup. So it almost reminds me a little bit of a role-playing game, or kind of Left 4 Dead to a certain degree, because each of the four-man team has a particular role, and they're even kind of dressed differently, so you can tell them apart. So there's a medic or a doctor, and this particular team, this one's played by Rachel Nichols. You have a driver, and this one is played by Alfie Allen. You have a navigator, which kind of seems a little redundant of a role, to be fair. And then you have the gunner, which is the security. And they're all kind of dressed differently in slightly different kind of like colour themes, hazmat suits, so you can kind of tell them apart. The difference with this film, compared to the other two kind of first-person movies, is there are a few scenes here which aren't first-person. It looks like there are a couple of wide shots here and there, and maybe they come through security cameras and stuff like that. 97, I would say, percent of this is probably first-person, so it's pretty much a first-person movie. The difference, though, with this one is you don't just see through one character's eyes. Each of the four-man team has a kind of a camera in their helmet, so basically the view will flip between the four different characters, so you do get to see some different points of view from whatever character is doing the most interesting thing on screen at once, basically. It's both good and a bad idea to a degree. Now, what I liked about that is, but you do see a bit of the larger world, but you're seeing it from kind of different elements, and the team do split up in certain ways. So sometimes you'll see something that's going on over in this section, and then kind of it will flip back to something that's happening with a different person. So it does give you that option of it being cut slightly more traditionally, rather than kind of the more sort of continuous shot like the other two films, that to a certain degree. The other thing as well is you actually get to see all the actors on screen, because you're not just seeing through the one person. The main character here is Rachel Nichols' character, but you do get to see her because you see her through the other people's cameras, basically. The downside is you sometimes can't figure out which person you're going to be seeing through, so it becomes a little bit confusing. And the other downside of the way this film is shot is it's quite kind of like as well as being hard to see who you're seeing. There's a lot of kind of I guess you would call it shaky cam, to be honest, especially in the sort of fight scenes and where people are running. It's really hard to see what's going on. This film is quite dark in places as well, and it literally looks like you've just kind of thrown a camera down some stairs and you just, what am I watching? So I kind of found it a little jarring sometimes in the kind of the technical aspects of it. Now, the actual story itself is, more or less your kind of standard zombie film, basically. It's this bunch of people kind of going out, fighting zombies. We are told that there are different levels of zombies, and they basically, as the virus hits, there's different stages that kind of are more severe as you go on. I didn't think they were particularly well defined about telling you about this virus, to be honest. The earlier stages, people more or less just have like a flu-like symptoms, but the later stages, they're kind of like rage-infected zombies. But we're not told, what causes these different phases. We don't do that, those sort of time frames. What I didn't even realise when I was first watching this film is that people in the earlier stages can still fully function as human beings and have all their faculties and stuff like that. So they're not the kind of just like mindless zombies you'd expect. They can have somewhat functioning lives, and you see them kind of wandering around on the streets, just kind of doing the day-to-day stuff. And I'm thinking, oh, I didn't realise that, and so I don't think it did a particularly good job of setting up the world and kind of explaining the what the actual virus does and stuff like that. You don't know where it's come from, I don't think. I don't remember it ever saying that either. And the other thing, they set up with the people here as well. Like I said, the navigator is a somewhat redundant role. To me, it seems more than one person would be needed for security on this. I don't know why the navigator is needed. I don't see why you can't fold that job into the just the driver, to be honest with you. So, you know, there are a kind of few little questionable decisions I have to say about the direction here and the kind of the way the sort of story unfolds here. On the plus side, the action is there are scenes where it's, you know, very kind of like kinetic, and basically some fantastic sort of set pieces, especially as you're kind of like you're viewing the action through the eyes of the person, and they're kind of fighting zombie after zombie and sort of battling their way through. Like I said, it does have their issues, certainly in regards to kind of the lighting, and sometimes you can't always see what's going on. So it's kind of a mixed bag in regards to that kind of thing. But I would say as well, for another plus point, I think the acting's all pretty good, with the possible exception of Alfie Allen, who's kind of doing this kind of American accent that he kind of slips in and out of, to be honest with you. He's not a bad actor, but he just can't quite get the accent right all of the time, I would say. But they're all kind of like relatively experienced actors, even though they're generally TV actors. You know, but I thought it was okay. The actual zombies themselves, or the kind of I guess you would call them more rage infected, there are some really good sort of kind of scary scenes where we kind of see the stage 5 zombies, I think it is, basically, and they're pretty cool. And there's a couple of decent scenes with the kind of the worst zombies, basically, and there's some quite kind of creepy bits and kind of like jump scares as well, which I thought was quite good. But overall, it's kind of a bit of a mixed bag, to be honest with you, this film. I think so it had some good ideas and some kind of like different things it could have brought to the table, and in some ways it works better in the fact that you do get to see a little bit more of the world than maybe the other two kind of first-person films. But at the same time, it's certainly not as polished as kind of as hardcore, and it's sometimes difficult to see what's going on. And I think probably the action scenes will be a lot better in the movie Hardcore than this one, basically, because they're kind of, like I say, hit and miss. But overall, I'll give this movie a 5 out of 10. It's kind of probably not as jarring as the other two. I would say it's a little bit easier to a degree. It's cut more like a standard film, although it clearly is just a first person. So if you're a bit kind of dubious about seeing a film which is purely in the first person, this one might be an easy one to kind of watch, because it's the way you flip between the different people and the kind of the breakup with this kind of, you know, more wide shots here and there as well, makes it a little easier to watch than the other two. Anyway, I'm going to give this film a 5 out of 10. It's an okay film overall. Have you seen it? What do you think of it? Leave a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.